But other than creating a black hole and an army of mutants, we live a simple life on peace.
Hey everyone, this is Spoonie, and I'm here with episode 6 of my adventures with Superman. Going to be doing a review and breakdown, so there will be spoilers. If you haven't seen any of the other videos, I've covered the last 5 episodes, and they are in a playlist on my channel. Okay, so the episode starts with Lois, and she's frantically trying to get in touch with Jimmy. At the end of the last episode, Clark, Lois, and Jimmy were supposed to go camping and Bigfoot hunting, and they stood him up, so he went alone and was abducted. Clark shows up at her door, and he tells her that he can't get a hold of Jimmy. He's been flying over the woods they were supposed to go camping in, and all around the city, and he could not find any trace of him. Lois is wondering if Jimmy's disappearance has anything to do with the abductions of the villains, and anyone connected to the tech we've seen recently. She's still angry at Clark for keeping secrets, but she does agree to help him for Jimmy's sake. Jimmy wakes up in a dark room and he's strapped to a table. A panel in the ceiling slides open and a mechanical device descends on him. Clark and Lois are in the woods, and Lois is able to pick up on Jimmy's trail. She reveals that her dad used to take her on these hardcore survival weekends when she was just a kid. She mentions that in addition to tracking, she learned many other skills, such as how to purify water and set broken bones. Clark is amazed to learn all this, but still being hurt from all his lies about Superman, Lois tells him that he won't really get a chance to learn anymore. They come across a fence that Clark didn't see when he was flying over the forest. Lois tries calling Jimmy, and she hears his phone ringing on the other side of the fence. She calls through a hole that was there, and Clark follows after her. He's following Lois when his senses are suddenly overwhelmed. It looks like they've walked into some kind of energy dome, and the light inside there has a red tint on it. So this is some kind of red sun filter, and it's likely the reason he didn't see it when he was flying over the forest. He's able to catch up to Lois, and they see a building in the distance near a mountainside, and there's a spherical chunk that seems to be missing from both. Lois finds Jimmy's phone, and they see that he filmed the moment of his abduction. And now, this is where I have to eat my words. In a past episode, he mentioned French super gorillas, but I do think Monsieur Malin is too weird and obscure to use. Jimmy wakes up face to face with this show's interpretation of Monsieur Malin and the brain. Now, I really didn't expect this. They're such bizarre, lesser-known characters that I didn't think they'd ever be used. I mean, in the first episode, Jimmy did mention talking French super gorillas on his podcast, but, that episode was full of so many Easter eggs and little references. I just figured this was, one of them. At the end of the last episode, we saw a giant ape silhouette. And in the DCU, you've got a lot more prominent apes like Gorilla Grodd and King Solivar. And as I mentioned last episode, even Titano would have been more appropriate. But it is a cool choice. I'm most familiar with the characters from Grant Morrison's Doom Patrol, the Vertigo series. Now, I believe they said they were using recreational psychedelics while writing the book. And I think if you've read it, at least, most of it, I think you'll agree that it shows. So the Brain and Monsieur Malin were created in the 1960s as Doom Patrol villains, so there was always like a weird concept there. The Brain was some unnamed French scientist who worked to increase the intelligence of apes like Malin. A lab accident ended up destroying his body, but Malin was able to transfer his brain to the cybernetic jar. Now, in Grant Morrison's Doom Patrol, we see the Brain get a new robotic body that allows him and Malin to express their love physically. So anyways, Jimmy is strapped to a table, and Malin and the Brain are about to cut his head open. He tells them that, unlike his friends, Lois and Clark, that these two actually seem to want to know what he thinks. Malin unexpectedly stops the machine and begins to comfort Jimmy against the protests of the Brain. Clark and Lois come across an area marked Cadmus Minefield, with a warning for gravitational anomalies. Now, much like in the comics, this version of Cadmus seems to specialize in genetic research. In the comics, they are notable for creating the clone Superboy, Con-El, who has been the main Superboy since his creation in the Death and Return of Superman storyline in the 90s. As they enter the minefield area, they activate a dormant robot. They're able to see signs of a battle, with some of the vehicles suspended in the air due to the gravity. Lois and Clark are talking about letting Jimmy down. She asks him if he's ever told Jimmy that he's Superman, to which he replies he hasn't. She confronts him about not even being able to open up to his best friend. It ends up coming out that the reason Lois feels so hurt about Clark's lies is that she's insecure that Clark's feelings for her aren't genuine.
You already know I'm Superman. What else do you need to know?
Did you lie about your feelings for me? Everything you said to me, was it all just a cover for you?
They get interrupted when that robot drone appears with dozens of other robots and starts shooting at them. We jump back to Cadmus, where Mala is giving Jimmy a full tour. He tells Jimmy of his and the Brain's origin. So 22 years ago, Cadmus was given some kind of strange technology from the US government. While Cadmus wanted to use the tech to create and innovate, their sister program, Task Force X, was more interested in developing weapons. So one of the Cadmus projects led to Mala gaining superintelligence. When the government found out that they weren't making weapons, Task Force X was sent in to shut them down. During the assault on Cadmus, an experiment involving a black hole was damaged. The resulting explosion is what carved out the building and mountain that we see in the present. Task Force X assumed everyone was dead and left. The Brain's body was destroyed, but Mala put him in the robot body to save him. Mala and the Brain start to argue over letting Jimmy stay with them. He slips out of the room to go exploring and discovers they have restarted the black hole. Lois and Clark are still being chased by the robots. Clark tries attacking one of them, and it has no effect. The robots end up combining to form a larger robot. It blasts Clark with a laser. He grabs Lois and flies away, but he can't get very far, being weakened by the laser. The robots start closing in, so they have to run on foot. There are hidden traps in the forest that are able to stop the robots. A machine gun turret pops out, and Clark jumps in front of Lois to shield her. He finds out he's bulletproof, which was something he wasn't sure of before. All he knew was that Lois was not. Back at Cadmus, Jimmy starts to confront Mala and the Brain about restarting the black hole. They admit that they sabotaged it originally to get rid of Task Force X and fake their deaths. They ended up restarting the project in the hopes of creating a stable wormhole. Lois and Clark find the entrance to Cadmus. The Brain and Mala rush out to attack them, but Jimmy gets in the middle and is able to call them off. Mala and the Brain head inside to give Jimmy and his friends some privacy. Clark apologizes to Jimmy, forgetting about the camping trip and for holding back secrets from his best friend. He tells Jimmy that he is Superman. Unfazed, though, Jimmy replies that he's known since freshman year.
The day I met you, you ripped the handle off of the door, then tried to play it like the screws had just come loose.
I mean, it could have been the screws.
The handle was ripped in half!
He figured it was a sensitive subject, so he wanted to wait until Clark was willing to talk about it. Lois is pissed that Jimmy knew and never told her. They get interrupted when the robots emerge from the woods. The Brain explains that they are called OMAC robots, and they are Task Force X's kill squad. Mala releases a group of mutants that he and the Brain had created when they were bored. The mutants start to fight the robots so the group can escape. The robots end up chasing them into the black hole room. Mala activates the black hole, and the OMACs are sucked in. Before the group gets pulled in, the black hole collapses and creates the stable wormhole. Now that Cadmus has been exposed, Mala and the Brain will be leaving. Mala bids Jimmy a farewell while the Brain corners Clark. He explains that the OMAC robots were activated by Clark's presence, and also that all this tech seems to respond to him. He tells Clark that they were hiding from the General and Task Force X. He invites Clark, who's different like they are, to join them in the wormhole. Clark declines because he cares about his friends and helping the world. Mala and the Brain enter the wormhole, leaving his friends. Sometime later, the General is walking through the ruins of Cadmus. He's talking to someone off screen, revealing that the black hole incident was 22 years ago and his first major assignment. We see that the person he's talking to is Ivo, who agrees to work with him and use the Cadmus resources to help stop Superman. So after the excitement of the last 2 episodes, I think this quiet, more subdued episode is the perfect breather. We get a lot of little character moments that delve into the Jimmy, Lois, and Clark dynamic. We get to learn more about Lois's childhood and her relationship with her father. For better or worse, he instilled in her the skills that make her such a determined journalist. Jimmy really gets to shine in this episode. From turning Mala and the Brain from would-be enemies into friends, to figuring out the Superman thing, Jimmy finally starts to feel like an equal to Lois and Clark and not just their sidekick. Now, in terms of the bigger picture, we're starting to get a little more details that are putting things into focus. The appearance of the tech weapons and the destruction of Cadmus both happened about 22 years ago. Now, in this series, Clark is 23, so it's pretty clear that the tech that they're using is Kryptonian and arrived at the same time he did. Ivo now working out of Cadmus is an interesting idea. As I mentioned earlier, Cadmus specializes in genetic research, specifically cloning. Now, I feel like Clark is too young in this show for him to have a younger Superboy clone. I'm thinking it's going to be more likely that we're going to see an imperfect clone, which will be kind of this show's interpretation of Bizarro. So this was a pretty good episode. We get to see the trio patch their relationship up. We get a couple new villains, very interesting characters, who end up not being villains. And we are getting more pieces of the puzzle that is what is going on with Task Force X and the strange, now pretty obviously Kryptonian technology. Now, I don't follow previews or anything, so I don't know what's coming in the next episode, but I will have that video out sometime next week, so keep an eye out for that. Otherwise, thanks for watching, and I hope to see you next time.